This week, we are bringing you stories of remarkable people who are making lasting impacts all around the world. And we're calling the series Champions for Change. It's our chance to revisit the amazing change makers we've all covered in the past and have never forgotten. Their passion inspires us as they continue to change the world. Parkland, Florida, now a city sadly synonymous with gun violence. In the year and a half since 17 people were murdered at their school, the students from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School have spearheaded a national debate about school security and gun rights and fueled an international student-led movement. Leading that charge, a brother and sister who survived the shooting by hiding in their classrooms, David and Lauren Hogg. They have become political and cultural forces inspiring thousands of people, including my friend, Allison Camerata.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Another deadly school shooting. I am in Parkland, Florida, scene of the latest school shooting. This is the site of the deadliest school shooting in the U.S. since Sandy Hook. When I got the call that Parkland had happened, that there was yet another school shooting, my heart sank. I have kids that I send off to school every day, and I know that they're no safer than the kids at Parkland were. I flew down to Parkland. The next morning we were on the air first thing. By two of the shooting survivors. David Hogg was one of my first interviews. Something was different right away.
No legislative action has been taken. All we have now is more guns and more chances for things to go wrong.
A senior at the time, he took cover in a classroom during the shooting and worried about his sister Lauren, a freshman. He just gripped the whole country's attention.
Please, take action.
He turned right to the camera. He was already beseeching leaders to jump into action with him.
You guys are the adults. You need to take some action and play a role. Work together, come over your politics.
Even in the hours after they'd been through the most hideous tragedy imaginable, they were already trying to change the world. Lauren, how are you feeling? And I felt the same way when I met Lauren Hogg.
Thinking about all the victims, and I just know there's a reason why I made it out that day, and that reason has to be to make change.
The never again hashtag cropped up because they didn't want to ever have this happen again.
We say no more.
They've traveled around the country. They've met other survivors of gun violence. They got the laws changed in Florida. They're not letting the lawmakers forget it. What are we looking at here?
This is our art installation. As I put up all those hundreds of crosses, crescents, and stars of David, I thought of my friends last year. We wrote things like teacher, doctor, to represent not only the people who are taken from gun violence, but are taken from society they are in.
You wanted to get the attention of lawmakers.
That's why we did it here, because we wanted those people, while they're walking in between breaks, when they're leaving work, and know that their inaction is leading for our friends, our sisters, our brothers, our moms and dads to die every single day.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
When you hit obstacles, how is it that you have been able to stay energized?
By looking back at the success that we have had, we focused on youth voter turnout and raising the youth's voice, because we know that it's not Democrats or Republicans that can solve this issue. It has to be human beings that solve this issue.
I am a mother, I am a fighter.
Is it true that the Parkland students were your inspiration to run for office?
Absolutely. I stood up and decided to run, to flip for the federal seat after Parkland. I was devastated that here again we had children that were the same age as my son that were gunned down. It would be a tragedy if I didn't stand up. And then I would be letting down my son and his legacy and every other family, every other victim that I have cried with over the last 7 years since Jordan was murdered. Each generation culturally has a cause. Sitting at the lunch counters, walking out of classrooms. It's the same thing. This is the civil rights movement that these young people are fighting for.
Change is here.
We need a Congress that goes out there and talks about this issue and gives us a deadline of when they're going to actually be able to stop gun violence.
David graduated from Stoneman Douglas in 2018. He's taking a year off from his studies to focus on activism, and he plans to attend Harvard this fall.
I feel as though in the last year we have made an abundant amount of progress. Honestly, how young people really have realized their power is the thing that I find to be the most profound.
They are change makers. I see both of them really changing the conversation in this country about gun violence, and then going forward and being leaders in our country.
It's still hard for me to think of myself as an activist because honestly, I never had that in mind when I started speaking out. I just was a kid who was upset that my friends were murdered in my school.
I also look ahead to the future. I mean, I just can't wait until we pass our first piece of federal legislation. That'll just be an incredibly impactful moment.
What's been your greatest achievement?
Now that we've shown that we can lead and we are leading together with other generations, I know that we can end this issue.
I'm just so impressed with these kids. All of us thought maybe this will peter out, maybe they'll have to be busy with school, but they haven't given up. They're just as strong a year later. They just are as energized as the day that I first met them.
And Allison is with me now. I love you for doing this.
Oh,
I mean,
thanks.
I know you have kiddos, you drop them off at school, you have all the same thoughts that parents do across the country, but to see these young voices, I mean, it gives me goosebumps just to think back to March for Our Lives in D.C. Tell me more about David and Lauren and what they're up to.
You know, they really want, as you heard them say, federal legislation. They did something remarkable. They got Florida, where, you know, people feel strongly about their guns, to change the legislation in the wake of what happened in Parkland. Now they want it on a national scale. So, of course, they want universal background checks. They want to ban really high-capacity magazines. They want more dollars, federal dollars, to study gun violence. And that's what they're setting their sights on. And so what they were doing in D.C., where you saw there was going from lawmaker to lawmaker and just, you know, making them hear their plea and setting all of that art installation up outside the windows of the Capitol so that lawmakers couldn't miss it and had to walk by it.
The fact that we have continued to cover school shootings, there have been 35 this school year. I was just talking to a 12-year-old Allison last week on the show who was describing to me in Colorado how he was holding this baseball bat and saying how totally brave, how he was ready to go down fighting and he was 12 and I'll never forget him. And it's just like our kids don't feel safe.
We have to live this way. I feel as though somehow we've accepted that this is our new normal. We don't have to send our kids off to school every day just crossing our fingers and hoping that they're not sitting ducks for gun violence. We can fix this. Australia had a mass shooting. They fixed it. Other places have given us actually a blueprint for how to do this. We're better than this. We just don't have to live this way.
We are. Thank you so much for bringing that story.
Thank you for featuring me.
You got it. Allison Camerata.